How's it going, folks? It's Lobo and welcome back to the channel. Welcome to my pre-watch Spider-Man No Way Home discussion, where I'm going to be going over 5 things that I'm most excited for about this film and 10 things that I wish to occur in said film. Before we begin, I just want to mention one thing very briefly. It's only going to take about a minute, but I just want to say I actually originally did a discussion where I talked about sort of the things I really liked and disliked from each of the 3 Spider-Man. And at this point right now, I've been talking for 2 hours, so I'm like, nobody's going to watch it to that extent, so I'm just going to cut that part out entirely, and we're just going to focus on the 5 things I'm most excited about, and then the 10 things that I want to see occur. So if you have any sort of questions related to any of the Spider-Man and things that I thought were my favorite sort of interpretation of Peter Parker, origin, things along those lines, just please ask me. I would be more than happy to answer, because it's kind of hurting my heart that I'm cutting this out, but it's just, I have so much to say on the matter that 2 hours is way too excessive for the premise of this video. So we're just going to go off of that, and we're just going to start right away with 5 things I'm most excited about. I had a whole bunch of bullet points on my phone that I wrote about, and that's why I'm saying I'm just going to wrap this up, because I was talking way too long. So anyway, like I said, we're going to get started here. And starting with number 5 on what I am most excited about to see in this film is the visuals and the incorporation of Doctor Strange, and as they mentioned recently, the Sam Raimi camera style. I am so excited to see the multiverse, because obviously that's going to be an aspect of this film that is explored, but from a visual standpoint, when you incorporate Spider-Man with Doctor Strange, it's just going to be so incredible to watch, because obviously we saw from the trailer when he was on the train and Doctor Strange was doing his sort of magic, Eldritch magic and whatnot, and you could see Peter hanging upside down and stuff. It's just such an amazing idea to put these 2 figures together and try to make an amazing visual spectacle, essentially. So seeing that all unravel and come to life is something I am beyond excited for, and especially since all the villain designs and everything is looking really good from a CG standpoint. And obviously, as I mentioned, the multiverse, I'm so excited to see that, because when you incorporate Doctor Strange's magic with sort of the mirror dimension and such, and having all these wild psychedelic visuals with from a superhero standpoint in the universe and an aspect of Marvel in the multiverse that we have not yet seen, having that all blend together, I'm beyond excited for, and I think that's going to be really amazing to watch. And I'm also seeing that in IMAX, so I'm beyond excited for that in that aspect from a visual standpoint. And at number 4, I'm very excited about the return of Andrew Garfield. I have not really mentioned him a lot before when it comes to Marvel or Spider-Man. In any of my sort of videos, I haven't really talked about him. I don't think I've actually talked about him once, but just a generalization with him. He was not my favorite Spider-Man, and I was not the biggest fan of his movies, but there were a lot of positives that I really enjoyed about his movies, and I thought he is honestly one of the best actors of our time. And I think personally, this might be a hot take, or it's just my opinion, and I shouldn't really be going into things like this, but I think he's the best actor out of the 3. Tom Holland told me why are superb actors. It's nothing against them, but I just think Andrew holds sort of the biggest light against them. If that's, I don't even think that's a saying, so don't quote me on that. Well, it's the wrong saying, but I just think he personally, from me, what I think is he is the best actor out of the 3. But I'm just excited to see him return, because I felt like he had an unfortunate circumstance. I thought he had the most potential as Peter Parker, because he quite frankly looks the most like Peter Parker. You can debate me on that, and I'd understand if you don't agree. That's fine. I'm just saying from a basic standpoint, he's the exact height of Peter Parker, same hair and eye color. So I know it's basic, but technically he's the most like Peter Parker, and like from a visual standpoint. So when you couple that with the fact that he's an amazing actor, I just thought it worked really well. So the fact that the script and studio interference kind of flipped the table and made it so like it was kind of his fault and not held to this high regard, I just felt sorry for him and felt like he kind of drew the short straw with that. So I just wish he had a better opportunity, as he had what I believe to be the most potential. So I'm really looking forward to his return, and hopefully he gets some sort of, not redemption, but he's seen in a new lens and held to a higher esteem, because I think he deserves it. So that aspect I'm very excited for. And just, again, seeing the return of him, because there were a lot of things that I loved about him. In particular, I know I said I wouldn't talk about my favorite things, but I think he had the best Spider-Man, like, physics, animations, and camera work, where he was doing acrobats and stuff. He had the best web swinging. I'm just going to say that. That's like the one opinion thing I'll say. I think he had the best web swinging. It was just amazing. So it was such an inspiration for the Insomniac game, Spider-Man on PlayStation, because Andrew just had the best animations and physics and sort of, as I mentioned, agility, acrobatics. When it came to Spider-Man, it was perfect, amazing. No pun intended, not trying to do Spider-Man adjective, but it was amazing, spectacularly. At number 3, I'm excited for Tom Holland's Peter Parker. I know I haven't mentioned this a lot. Well, I kind of never have. If you don't know, Tom Holland's my least favorite sort of Spider-Man. Again, this has nothing to do with the actor. Anytime there's sort of a difference of opinion, or I just feel like something doesn't work for me, it more so has to do with the direction of the story rather than an actor's performance. Because I think every single Spider-Man actor to date has been, well, just the main big three, Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, Tom Holland, they're all incredible actors. And Tom Holland's a very, very, very good actor, and I think he does an incredible job, but it's just more so the direction of the story and how things in that matter are handled are what makes him my least favorite, not necessarily directly relating to him. But with all that being said, I just really am excited for it, because apparently they're going to focus more on maturity in this film, and that's something I believe to be lacking from his 2 solo movies, so I'm very excited to see him in a new light and in one that is familiar to myself, because I feel like both Andrew and Tobey's movies are way more mature and realistic than his are, because I feel like there's just too much of an abundance of comedy and lightheartedness, because as you know, Spider-Man has a bunch of those qualities where it's lightheartedness mixed with humor, because that's what's essential to his character, not just because it's a comic book character and it's supposed to appeal to younger audiences, but Spider-Man as an individual, as Peter Parker, and as a human, goes through a lot of unsettling things. He goes through loss and these sort of setbacks and tragedies, and it takes a lot, not just physically, emotionally and mentally, and his sort of humor and the lightheartedness and his ability to make terrible jokes and quips and awkwardness and heat of the moment is what keeps him positive and keeps him focused, and it adds to his ability to endure. And I feel like that they're focusing so much in Tom Holland's movies on humor without really incorporating the suffering, that it's just sort of missing a beat. It's too much in one direction. I want them to balance it out with more maturity. And Tom Holland, the director, and all cast interviews are claiming that this movie is way more mature, so I'm very excited to see him develop in that regard, and I think that will do a lot for those who, like myself, don't really have the biggest favor over him, over his iteration of Spider-Man. At number 2, what I'm most excited about for this film is the villains. I am beyond excited for the return of Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin, Alfred Molina as Doc Ock, and Jamie Foxx as Electro. I'm interested to see that as well. It's funny too, because I was recently rewatching The Amazing Spider-Man. It's not that I've never not been fond of Electro, but never to this much degree, because upon rewatching it, I'm like, damn, I like Electro so much more. Not Max Dillon. I feel like they really did him dirty with the Max Dillon, because I know a lot of people are like, oh my god, how did he get a haircut now and stuff, but I wasn't a fan of Max Dillon, but I really liked his Electro, because I felt like his Electro was very intimidating, because he was so full of hatred and anger, and my god, bro, his theme goes so hard, but I really like his character. I know it's going to be a little bit different here, because now he's using like an arc reactor. He's got his normal look and a more sort of looks like a construction worker, more comic-like in terms of coloration and just being like not blue, as he likes to say it, because he's so excited he's not blue. I can understand that, but I'm just excited to see how his sort of character translated over and stuff. Same thing with Green Goblin and Doc Ock. And then also with Sandman and Lizard, I'm very interested to see how they all sort of translated over, because as Doctor Strange said, they all die fighting Spider-Man, but I'm like, I'm not Lizard and Sandman though. But obviously in their respective universes, the timeline kept continuing on, so I can't wait to see how they explain things went down the road. But we'll just have to wait and see in that regard. Again, if you want me to explain any bit about the villains, because I have a lot to say, trust me. I was talking about this subject for like 2 hours earlier, but I had to condense it as I am doing now. But I just want to focus on my main sort of excitement for this, and that's going to be Green Goblin. Willem Dafoe's return, because as Willem Dafoe mentioned, the Goblin this time around has a stake to claim. He has a message to convey, so I'm so interested to see what that's going to be. I also heard non-spoiler reports that his performance in this, well, not necessarily just his performance, but just sort of his outing and characterization of Green Goblin in this is potentially better than he was in the original first Spider-Man. So I'm like, that's something really incredible to think about. But as I was saying, he has a message to convey. I'm just wondering how that translates, because in the original one, he was initially trying to recruit Peter, well, Spider-Man, but same thing. And as he said, I extended a hand and you spat in my face. And then he gave him the amazing talk about how people love to see a hero fail, fall, die trying. And in spite of everything you've ever done for them, eventually they will grow to hate you. That sort of idea is just so cool to think about and put into perspective. And in the original Spider-Man, it was all about choice. He gave Peter a choice. He cannot marry Jane because, as he said, he will go after his heart. And then he had a bunch of hostages, and most of them were children. And he had both of them in his other hands. He had one in one hand, one in the other. And he's like, we are who we choose to be, now we choose. And he drops them both. And obviously Spider-Man saves them both. But it's presenting that choice. And as we hear in the new trailer, he's saying, Peter, you're struggling to have everything you want while the world tries to make you choose. So I'm like, is there going to be some similar parallels of making very tough choices? Because that would be excellent. Because as I said, I'm not the biggest fan of Tom Holland. Spider-Man, because I feel like he's lacking that maturity and loss. And if Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin is going to present those hard choices that make Spider-Man Spider-Man, then I'm all for it. I'm very excited for the possibility of that. Now, coming in at number 1, I'm going to admit, this one is just pure blissful nostalgia and love. Those rose-tinted glasses set to absolute max. It's just that childhood fondness. I am most excited for the return of Tobey Maguire. Hands down, it doesn't even come close. I don't know how many times I've said this before, but I'll say it again. Tobey Maguire was absolutely my childhood from like a very young age. So I would say like in between like 8 years old and down, it was pretty much 100% him. It was all about him. I had the pajamas, the costume, the canned web shooters, the mask, the toys. I had that old box TV because we couldn't really afford anything, and it was such a privilege to have a TV in your room when you were such a young kid. And I'd have to watch his movies on VCR because those were like the only movies I owned, him and Michael Keaton's Batman. But Tobey's films, I always played them over and over and rewatched them, and I just loved them to death. I even wore his damn costume underneath my clothes when I went to school, and then they'd have to make me take it off in the bathroom. It was just, I loved Tobey's portrayal in Spider-Man films so damn much. It's just, so I can't even admit, just seeing him here again is just, there's really no words when you think about it, because it's never been done before, and I'm honestly at a loss for words, because recapturing that feeling when you were a kid, when everything was so sort of calm, and I'm not trying to make it like, oh my god, my life is so tragic right now, but it's just obviously when you get older things are different. But childhood is supposed to be such an innocent time and such a time to enjoy and stuff, and Tobey was such a large part of that. So recapturing that essence and feeling is just, it's just gonna be so good. I'm probably gonna get so emotional. And I'm not even scared to admit it. I'm going to have to like bring tissues, because when I listened for the past like couple weeks, honestly past couple months, sometimes I'll just put on his theme and listen to it and just think about the idea of seeing him again. It brings me to tears. I'm not even afraid to say it. I'm just so excited to see him again. And again, recapture that feeling I had when I was a kid. It's just, wow. I'm just speechless in light of that, and just the thought of that. So Easily what I'm most excited for. And before I start unraveling and unwinding here, because the bulk of what those 2 hours of cut footage was just me talking about him and how perfect his origin was, with the letting the robber go and feeling the guilt, the line, great power comes great responsibility, saying the damn line, I have a father, his name was Ben Parker, and all those beautiful, amazing scenes. Rosemary Harris having the best Aunt May lines ever so far to date, and just saying there's a hero in all of us. His return as Spider-Man, getting his powers back and stuff. Just all those, I could talk about them for hours, but I'm just going to refrain from them. So we're going to move on here. Again, if you want me to talk about them down in the comments, I would be beyond excited and willing to. Believe me, it's like it kills my heart on the inside that I'm not saying certain things. Because, oh my God, you know, if you're a fan of Tobey Maguire or you're just a fan of Spider-Man in general, you know how it feels. Just so hard to resist the urge to talk about it, but especially Tobey, because my favorite Spider-Man, and I think he was the best out of all of them. I don't even think that's a nostalgic thing. I just think, like, if you want me to elaborate on that, I will. But just so many things about him were perfect. In particular, his origin, the best out of all of them. I know I'm talking with my hands a lot. I'm part Italian, but I'm just so angsty or whatever. I don't even know if that's a word, but as I said, we're going to move on here to the 10 things that I want to see happen. You can technically call these predictions. There are more things I just want to see happen, but again, if you want to say they're my predictions, I'll accept that, because technically if I'm saying them, then they are sort of my predictions, because I base this on things that could potentially happen, but again, they're just more so things that I would want to happen. So number 10, what I want to see happen is the spell to work. The spell Doctor Strange cast for everyone to forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. I want that to work. By the end of the film, I know they're going to have some hiccups along the way with the multiverse and the villains coming through and not necessarily working out as they would have wanted. But by the end of it, I do hope that things go back to normal where nobody knows Peter Parker is Spider-Man, because one of the foundations or core values of Peter Parker is this dual identity. In the trailer, Doctor Strange mentions it, so I'm like, finally, we're going to have some sort of talk about that. Was something I felt was lacking from Tom Holland's movies, but again, going off of Spider-Man's character, he has to struggle between Peter Parker and Spider-Man. It causes him to lose jobs, miss out on dates with MJ, whoever, helping out Uncle Ben. It's all those sort of things, having responsibility and trying to juggle it with a secret is what makes it so hard for Spider-Man, but in terms of character, so amazing, because, again, that ability to endure and sort of take whatever comes at you, even if it's just so atrocious, so terrible, and so disheartening, and sort of finding your footing in all of that chaos and navigating your way through back to the light in sort of a symbolic way is what makes Spider-Man such a great character. So having him go back to struggling with these two identities is pretty much essential to him, and I just don't like the idea of him being exposed, because, again, villains go after your loved ones, so it's like such a big deal when they know who you are, when they're like, oh my God, he knows who I am. Like when Goblin knew who he was and he figured that out and stuff, and then he's like, oh my God, he knows who I am. It's that sort of realization. So the fact that everyone in the world knows Peter Parker is Spider-Man, it just does not work for me. I know in the comics they had the sort of run where Mephisto reset everything, but it costs, I think, his marriage with MJ or something. So I'm like, it's kind of funny that everyone's like, oh, Mephisto. But yeah, as I was saying, like the thing with Tobey where Goblin knew, so it instilled that fear because the Green Goblin was going after his heart and stuff. So it's like the thing like that, the ones closest to you will always pay, because Spider-Man is a gift, but it's also a curse. And again, I know I'm using a lot of lines of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, but they did it the best. I don't mean to say that in a biased opinion, but I'm just saying, come on, man. Coming in at number 9, I just hope that all the characters, these sort of newcomers and villains as well, are handled correctly. What I mean by that is it's hard because this is John Watts, a different director. So you have characters from other franchises and sort of directed styles all coming in. So I hope that you see some consistency with their characters. And if you're not aware, James Gunn specifically wrote the lines and sort of dialogue for the Guardians characters in Infinity War and Endgame, so there was that bridge of consistency. It didn't feel like out of character for them to say or act or perform. So I'm looking for that consistency, so I hope that the characters are sort of beholden to how they were portrayed in their original movies. Like, I want the same sort of personality, and I want to feel the same sense of character value, core value. And then with the villains, I want their stories to be essentially the same. So that's why initially at first I was like so concerned with Doc Ock, because I'm like, oh my god, he had an origin. I will not die a monster. I'm like, now he's just reverted back. Same thing with Sandman. You know, I'm not bored. And one of my favorite sort of interactions ever, which I thought was just beautiful, when he was talking to him about accidentally killing Uncle Ben, and he's doing everything for his daughter, and he's not asking for forgiveness. He just wants Peter to understand. I'm like, are they going to undo that? And same thing with Lizard, where he was just this sort of traumatized individual, a scientist at his heart, and he just wanted to frankly grow back his arm. And he wasn't bad. He saved Peter at the end once the serum, he was cured from it. So I want them to handle the characters right and not do it in a way that it just feels unnatural or unfamiliar. I want that, as I said, consistency, and I want to really feel like this is how they would act in their circumstance. Like, this is their real character. For number 8, this is not necessarily something I really, really want, but it's something I would not mind and actually really like to see, but it's not an absolute necessity. It's a new spider symbol, and what I mean by that is Tom Holland's design. I want it to change. And I know you might be like, ooh, why is that and stuff, because technically no Spider-Man symbol has really changed, minus the symbiote suit in Spider-Man 3, but I just feel like, to me, I never really was a fan of his symbol. I think it looks too much like a beetle rather than a spider. It doesn't have like that really arachnid type of look. And I think it would be cool if he saw both Toby and Andrews and was like, huh, wow, look at those. Let me redesign mine. And pretty much, since Tony Stark was the one who crafted the symbol, it looked a little bit different on the back of his suit, his homemade suit, because I know he originally had his own symbol, but Tony Stark's does look different than how Tom Holland's Peter did it with his first homemade suit. So I would hope that he would, seeing their symbols, either like combine his with theirs or just craft a new symbol entirely that's not Tony Stark's, but is his own. So I would love to see him sort of really embrace the identity of Spider-Man, seeing other Spider-Man, and craft a new symbol entirely, comprised pretty much entirely of his own thoughts and sort of execution. At number 7, I would love to see a very serious fight. Tom Holland talked about this a bit, where he said it's going to be a bit more violent, like Spider-Man's going to punch in this. And again, just as I mentioned earlier, that's along the lines of mature and gritty, and that's something I really want to see, because Spider-Man, even though he's such this colorful, hopeful, lighthearted character, as I always mention, there is a degree of tragedy and maturity that comes along with him, and I think it's high time we rev up the gear when it comes to those aspects for Tom Holland's film. So I'd love a very personal fight where you feel the stakes, you feel the sort of urgency of it, and it feels very violent. I know it sounds a bit weird. I'm like, oh, I want to see violence, but when you think about Tobey's fight with Green Goblin, they were punching. He blew up half his mask with the pumpkin bomb, and you could see like blood and stuff, and he was getting all hit, and it's just that look of him with the exposed mask was so good. But you could see them like punching each other. It was very personal, very gritty, and very dark, but it just adds to the emotion and sort of the heat of the moment. So I'd love to see them do something with that with Tom Holland. And I think it could do a lot for Peter's growth as well, being sort of shaken a bit and having to overcome that. I think could do a lot for him character-wise. So I would love to see a sort of more gritty / personal fight. That's definitely something I'd love to see. At number 6, this one's a bit weird, I'll have to admit, but it's definitely something I want to see. I want to see a sort of good end credit, post credit scene that ties or sets up the future, not just for Spider-Man, but for the next phase of the MCU. I want it to be something related to either Doctor Strange, Wanda, Kang. I want it to be related to sort of the more mystic or cosmic scale of the MCU or the multiverse. I really wanted to sort of tease the future of the MCU because we're dealing with this giant multiversal event in releasing the villains from other universes, other Spider-Man appearing, so we're definitely really stepping into that phase of the MCU, and I think it would be really good to set up some ties to pretty much Loki here with Kang, or just Doctor Strange, because again, Multiverse of Madness. So I'd like to see some sort of bridge to this new phase of the MCU and this new sort of exploration we're going into. So end credit scene wise, I just would like to see something more cosmic rather than, yes, a Spider-Man tease, but something for the next, well, the grand scale of the MCU's future entirely. That's something I would really love to see, and I hope to see. Even if it's just a slight little tease, it would just do so much for looking forward to and stuff, and sort of setting your eyes on the future and on the horizon. Number 5, this is definitely nostalgia and just fan service, but I would love if Danny Elfman's main theme played when Tobey appears. Hearing that music, it's just, I mentioned this before, it's just, it's so good. It invokes so many emotions because it's not just heroic and very theatrical and epic, but it's also subtly beautiful in a sense and very inspiring because, as I mentioned, Tobey was a very hopeful Spider-Man, and that's what Spider-Man's character in his essence is. And one scene in particular that I always think about in Spider-Man is Spider-Man 3. I remember watching that as a kid when he finally got his suit back, when he took off the symbiote suit and he went in the suitcase, got his original suit. I know I'm saying suit a lot. It sounds like that meme, you know, when he's like, I'm at the soup store. You know what I'm talking about? It's like a weird animation thing where he's like, I'm at the soup store. And he's trying to buy soup. You probably have no idea what we're talking about. So just disregard that. But anyway, he had his original suit and he was looking at it, and Danny Elfman's music started playing in the back and stuff. But then once he put it on, when Sandman and Venom had Mary Jane and she was sort of suspended in the taxi up in the air, and you had a whole bunch of people in a crowd and reporters and stuff. Then Danny Elfman's like, the beginning starts really kicking off and the volume increases, and then all the people turn around and stuff, and then when the peak of the song, you know what I'm talking about, which part hits, and then that's when he swings and all the people see him and they start cheering because he's inspiring. He's that hope, that beacon, that light, and Spider-Man's back playing with that theme. He lands in front of the American flag. It's all patriotic and epic and stuff. But seeing that as a kid, that's like the epitome of what I wanted to be, that hero. I'm like, damn, I really want to be this. This is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I just will never forget that. His return with the music, it was just such a spectacular scene. And if I could hear that theme one more time for his return, because it fits his character so well. Not to quote Tony Stark, but I'm going to lose it. I really will. Here at number 4, I have something that might be controversial. Well, technically, here's the thing. It sort of negates plot growth specifically for Tom, because I know technically this is a Tom sort of centric film. Well, Tom Holland, his Peter Parker, I know I always call him Tom Holland, but I would love if where MJ falls, it's Andrew's Peter that saves her. I know as I mentioned, it would sort of come in the way of growth for Tom's Peter, where he's successfully saving her and stuff, and it would seem as though he can't do it himself, but it's just hard for me because Andrew really ended on such a sour note by not getting Spider-Man 3 with Mary Jane and potentially Felicia Hardy. And while just having a continuation of the Spider-Man universe, it ended on that sort of bittersweet note with Gwen Stacy's death. I would love if he had sort of a redemption, and yeah, you could say redemption. That's essentially what it is, so I'm not going to pretend that it's not. He would have his redemption by saving, and this version of MJ, well, Michelle, because she's not really MJ, but we'll talk about that later. What? Yeah, so I would love if they did that, because it would be full circle and stuff, and it's very important to him, and I think if he could do that for Tom's Peter, it would also mean a lot to him, because he would feel useful again. I know that it's going to be years in between when his Spider-Man had Gwen Stacy's death and stuff, but just to see that sort of cycle would and pay respect to that unfortunate event would do a lot for his character. And I just, again, as I mentioned, I wish Andrew had a better opportunity. So I just feel like if people could see him, like fans could see him achieve that, then it would be good for his sort of image of the character. I know it's a bit weird to comprehend, but I feel like he was done such a disservice. So to see him do something really good and actually be like really useful in this film, and since it's such a parallel, kind of like Natasha falling, and then because I just recently watched Hawkeye, and then this time Kate fell, but she survived. So that sort of parallel, I'd love to see come full circle with Andrew. For number 3, one of my biggest complaints with Tom Holland's Spider-Man has always been the lack of Uncle Ben. And I would kill to see him have a conversation or just pay respect to Ben Parker. Like, please. He's so essential to Spider-Man's character because he's pretty much what started the whole thing, because it's that guilt that he felt when his uncle died by letting the robber go and then having his last conversation not being that pleasant with him is what drove him to be who he is, because he's trying to live up to the person his uncle wanted him to be, because he always believed in Peter. So the fact that they disregarded him, and Marissa Tomei's Aunt May just completely ignores her husband. I know technically people can move on, I'm not denying that, but they've been married for like 30 years. So I'm like, how can you not even talk about him once? I know they said recently they cut out a scene of Uncle Ben in Spider-Man Homecoming. I'm like, that was a dumb decision. I'm not even like, I don't even care to not admit it. I'm saying it. That was a dumb decision. They should not have done that. They need just some reference to him. And that's why I'm saying, that's why Tobey's always my favorite, because he had the great power comes great responsibility. They had essentially the thing with Bonesaw, who was pretty much Crusher Hogan, and he let the robber go, and then seeing, hey, it was the same robber that I let go who killed Uncle Ben. And then it came full circle when Green Goblin was like, be a son to me as I've been a father to you. And then he was like, I already have a father. His name was Ben Parker. Just, you know, I wouldn't even care if they did something like Tom was saying. I took such a weird sort of attachment or modeling myself after Tony Stark because I've missed my uncle and I needed a father figure. Something like that. I don't know. Just pay some respect to the man, because he's so vital to Spider-Man's character, and I honestly don't know how his movie, well, not his movies, but just like his character has lasted this long without really paying respect to Uncle Ben. It's just, I don't know. It's always bothered me that there was no mention of him at all. At number 2, this one is going to be a little bit darker because it has to deal with loss and, well, not murder, but death. But I want Tom's Peter to lose. I want him to experience like real tough loss. I know everyone is like, but he lost Tony. I'm talking about a Spider-Man character. Tony Stark is not a Spider-Man character. I want him to lose a Spider-Man character. So either his friend Ned, MJ, or Aunt May. I think honestly, realistically, none of those individuals would die. I feel like Happy will be the one to die, and they just kind of disregard it. But I would love, I know it sounds weird, but I would love if he experienced loss, because it does so much for a person to undergo growth. And it adds with the maturity, because when you deal with things like that, you don't come out of it really the same person. Doesn't mean things get worse, but it's just a sort of life lesson and an experience that changes you ultimately. So seeing that sort of evolution in Tom's Peter would be something I would really appreciate, and I'm hoping to see. But being realistic, I don't think Aunt May would die, because like, I know it's debatable whether or not he has Tony Stark's money, but he still needs someone to live with. And he's still technically, even though he's heading to college, he still needs like a parent, I guess. Even though I've never really been fond of her Aunt May, because I feel like she lacked a lot of emotional scenes, and pretty much Rosemary Harris had the best Aunt May lines, especially like as I mentioned earlier, or I think earlier, because I did so many different takes of this because I talk too much, but like the talking about there's a hero in all of us and stuff, that speech. But I don't think Aunt May would die. And MJ, it's hard because when you look at the trailer, you can see sort of things that might occur after the battle. Like when he kissed MJ, he was all tattered and dirty and had cuts on him. So I'm like, that's probably after the battle. So you would have to assume he won. I'm like, then you would have to also assume, since he's kissing MJ, that she lived. And then same thing with Aunt May, because he's like talking to her and he's like, this is all my fault, I can't save everyone. I'm like, she's alive in that scene. It looks like Tom Holland just went through loss. So it's definitely not her that dies. And I don't think Ned will die either, because everyone says he'll be Hobgoblin or whatever in a future film. I'm like, I wouldn't mind that. That would be cool to see, sort of the friend versus friend, because that would make for an emotional story. So I'm all for it. But so that just like honestly leaves Happy to be the one that die, which is kind of, again, he's not really a Spider-Man character, but it could work for Peter's character growth, I guess. Personally, for me, what I would really like to see is Aunt May to die. That sounds horrible saying out loud, but I'd love if Green Goblin were the one who would do it, because I feel like he's such a dark character and he's so deranged and crazy, and he's Spider-Man's biggest bad, so to speak. So I feel like it would make so much sense, and as all the actors say, sort of the standout villain is indeed Willem Dafoe, because he's like the most scary and stuff, and I feel like it could really sort of tonally change the tone. Tonally and totally change the tone of the movie if you have this villain actually accomplish something to that magnitude, because he knows he's Peter. Because remember, we'll go after his heart. That's what the Green Goblin always does. So I think if he were to kill Aunt May, then that would be really powerful and really sort of traumatizing for Peter. And then him having to, as I always mention with Spider-Man, endure and keep walking and just bear down with that and try to overcome these opposing forces would be so good for his character growth. Finally, at number 1, this whole damn list is just things that I want. So if you don't agree with it, that's fine, because again, this is my list. I'm not supposed to make this anyone else's, but this is just something I feel like shouldn't be on the list, but it also should. You're gonna know because I'm gonna say it, but this is definitely more have to derive from my love of Tobey Maguire's Peter, but it's also something I think that could make sort of plausible sense when it comes to Tom's Peter. And what I mean by that is I want Tobey's Peter to tell Tom's Peter, this sounds so trippy saying, I want him to be the one that tells Tom the famous line, with great power comes great responsibility. If Tobey does that, I would love that. Not just because I'm like, oh my god, Tobey said it. I love Tobey so much. I love his Spider-Man. But again, for Tom's character, because the underlying theme of Spider-Man is responsibility and making these tough decisions and sacrifices. So seeing those sort of underlying themes and occurrences take form in words, and words that Tom's Peter can sort of start to live by, would be spectacular. And having Tobey be the one as this sort of original Spider-Man, this mature Spider-Man, the more experienced, I've been there, I've suffered, I've been through it all, let me instill my knowledge, as like a mentorship. Like that's the mentorship I would take, not Tony Stark, like another experienced Spider-Man, especially Tobey's. So that, if that happened, I would just, it would make me not only just love Tobey more, but also Tom Holland, which is surprising. So a positive thing that affects my opinion of both Spider-Man. So that's something I would just love to see. I don't think that will happen, because I feel like for freshman year, they're probably going to do the line or something. Not necessarily the specific line, but they'll probably do something with Uncle Ben. Imagine if they disclude Uncle Ben from that too. Oh my god, there's gonna be hell to pay when I review that or watch that, because I'm gonna be so mad with that. But I would just love if he's the one who says that line. It's funny too, because this thing that I want to happen so badly, my number 1, the line, it's actually something I've thought about for so many weeks, where I just kind of like sit and think about the movie, because I've even dreamed about the damn movie. I literally last night I had a dream about the movie where I watched it and Tobey and Andrew actually weren't in it, and me and the entire theater was like in shock and almost like tears, where we were just like, heartbroken. We're like, this movie's awful. I can't believe they did this to us. They weren't even in it, and oh my god, it's like traumatic, bro. I know that's not gonna happen. And technically, that's bad. Just because they're in the movie, it automatically makes the movie bad. I'm not saying that, but it's just, I would feel. Imagine if it was real. I would feel so betrayed. I would feel so disappointed because I'm so excited. But it was honestly a nightmare. But as I was saying, I always think about Toby's Peter recently because I know he's going to be in the movie. And so when I think about the scene, how it can work, I wish it would be like you combine number 2 and number 1 where Tom's Peter lost someone and then Toby and him sit down or it's like him and Andrew are going to depart back to their own world and Doctor Strange will send them back or something and Toby's just kind of like, no, just I want to talk to Peter for a second, even though it's weird. He's like talking to himself, but him and Tom's Peter sit down after Tom's Peter just lost someone, and then he talks to him. He's like, like in this life you're gonna lose a lot and stuff, and he starts talking to him about sort of understanding what he's going through and how you just have to always persist and keep a positive attitude, and you're gonna make a lot of enemies. And you have this responsibility to the people you love, people you care about, to do what's right no matter what and stuff. And then say the line with great power, something along those lines. It would just be incredible. I always daydream about it, but we'll see. Maybe it'll happen. I don't know. If it does, I'm gonna like shit my pants in the theater, bro. Oh my god, I'm literally not even lying. I'm bringing tissues just because when the first time I see Toby's Peter, I know I'm gonna lose it. But if there's either that line or the Danny Elfman theme, I'm gonna go fucking ballistic. I'm sorry for my language, but I'm gonna absolutely lose it in my seat. So for the people sitting next to me, some of the friends that decide to sit next to me, they're in for it, man. Holy shit. But anyway, that is 10 things I would love to see occur in this movie, and those were 5 things that I'm most looking forward to. Again, I would have talked for hours and hours and hours and hours about this subject, about all 3 Spider-Men, if I had the time, and if I knew that you would watch it. Because let's be real, I know you guys aren't going to watch hours of me talking, because that's excessive, and I won't do that to you. I won't put you through that torture. But if you watch till this point, I have like the utmost respect for you. But again, I would just love if you would not ask me because I'm like, I love when people ask me questions. It's just more so that I would love to know your opinion and also have a conversation with you about it, because I have so much to say, in particular about Toby, but just all the Spider-Man in general, and Spider-Man as a standalone character. So having that opportunity to have discussion with you would really make my day, so to speak. Well, technically, at the time I release this, I'm going to be heading to the movie, so I won't have the time, but I would love to sort of, at some point, have this conversation. And just sort of, not like a bonus thing, but just, I want to put more emphasis on when I said I want these characters handled well. When it comes to Andrew and Toby, I don't want their Spider-Man, their Peter Parker, to be sort of downgraded or nerfed just to promote Tom Holland's Peter Parker. Because yes, I know this is Tom Holland's sort of centered movie. It's technically his movie. But I don't want just to put him up that they have to bring them down. There's a way you can make them all seem very capable. Not just fighters, but as people. You don't have to disrespect them just so you can make Tom Holland seem like the sort of victor in this movie. So I hope they handle it in a way that definitely pays respects and makes sense for the expertise and sort of the ability of Toby and Andrew's Spider-Man, but can also give Tom Holland his moment, because technically, as I said, this is his movie. So I want to do it, I want them to do it in a way that is natural and makes sense and doesn't piss off all the fan bases. And that's, again, for me, I hope they went. I would be more lenient if they did something wrong with Andrew, because I liked him a lot, but just there's no comparison when it comes to Toby. So if they handle Toby wrong, I'm going to be very mad. And again, it's not that I'm saying don't make Tom Holland seem like a really good accomplished Peter Parker in this movie. I want him to. Again, I said I want to see growth, but just do it in a way that doesn't sort of drag the other Spider-Man through the mud. That's all I want. So anyway, like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I would love to know your opinions. And at the time I'm releasing this, I'm gonna go watch the movie. I'm on my way because I'm gonna sort of make this public right before I leave. Right now it's 1 in the morning, so technically it's Thursday the 16th. So today I'm gonna watch the movie, bro. I'm gonna lose my mind, man. Holy shit, I'm gonna actually lose it. Oh my god. It's funny. It's like terrible to think about. I'm like, imagine if I was like, when I go to drive there, it's like I get in a car crash, I die, I never get to see this movie. I have like all these terrible thoughts and stuff, and then I'm like, no, I gotta be like Kratos, where I'm like, the hands of death could not defeat me. Like, I just gotta be immortal for this shit. I have to see this movie no matter what. So, man, I'm just so excited. And with that being said, once I watch the movie, I'm gonna post a spoiler discussion, and that is gonna be, I'm gonna make that as long as I want, because as I said here, I'm condensing it. I want it to be sort of on the shorter side, just so you, for your attention span and for your sake. But for a spoiler discussion talk, I'm gonna go all out. So I'm expecting that to be honestly 2 to 3 hours long. I'm not kidding. I can talk for that long, and I will, and I want to. So that's just what I'm saying. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. And until then, I will see you all. Technically, the next video, what will the next video be? I don't think I'm gonna watch Hawkeye tomorrow. So yeah, I will see you folks in the next video, which will be my Spider-Man No Way Home post-watch discussion. So yeah, I'll see you guys then.